Titanic is perhaps the most famous ship in history. She is the quintessential shipwreck of modern history for a variety of reasons. I outlined these reasons, at least as I see them, in a video last year. But in this video, I want to talk about a sad truth that those who study Titanic know all too well, and that is the fact that her wreck will, one day, be gone. When exactly this beloved and tragic ship will disappear is a matter of debate, but with each expedition to the wreck site, there is a chance that the researchers will resurface with the solemn news that the wreck has collapsed. If that is Titanic's fate, the ship will one day become an unrecognizable mess of debris and decaying metal, with countless artifacts buried beneath. We will always have the stories and written accounts of Titanic, but nothing brings a story to life like something tangible, something that you can see and touch, something that you know was there when the ship went down. With all of Titanic's survivors gone and the wreck quickly decaying, how will we preserve the memory of Titanic for future generations? The technical questions involved in retrieving items from the wreck site have largely been answered. We've even salvaged a 15-ton piece of Titanic's hull from the debris field in 1988. It has since been dubbed the Big Piece. So, from a technical perspective, there is a lot that can be done to retrieve items from Titanic. But there's still the ethical question. Is it right to take items from a wreck that is seen by many as a gravesite? This is a touchy subject, and some people would assert that we should not even visit the wreck site. To be clear, I am not of this opinion, but this is a nuanced debate. Every visit is an invasion, but it is a matter of degree. Approaching the site in a manned submersible and taking photographs or video is one thing, but taking an item from the debris field is a step beyond this. Going inside the wreck and disturbing it is yet another thing, and going inside the wreck and taking an artifact is on a completely different level. Of course, as I alluded to, we have taken items from the debris field, but that fact doesn't make it right or wrong to do so, although it does set a precedent. Some will argue that we should take items from the debris field, but not the personal items of individual victims, things like shoes or luggage. Others will say that taking anything from the debris field is acceptable, as long as it is for the purpose of preserving the items, maybe by donating them to or exhibiting them at museums, as opposed to for profit by selling them to individual collectors. Yet we've done both. When I was a kid, too young to have thought twice about it, I purchased a piece of coal from Titanic's wreck. That purchase represented profit for the salvage company, and I am ashamed to admit that I no longer have that piece of coal. That purchase did not do anyone any good. But what about the law? Well, it's tricky, due in part to the fact that the ship is in international waters. But due to a series of decisions made by the U.S. District Court for the Eastern District of Virginia and the Fourth Circuit Court of Appeals, one U.S.-based company has sole salvage rights to the wreck. This does not mean that it is the only entity which can visit the wreck, just that it is the only entity which can salvage items from the wreck. The company is subject to certain conditions in doing so, however. Without going into all the details, the ruling essentially requires the company to be, quote, conserved and curated consistent with current international and U.S. historic preservation standards. This is from the NOAA Office of General Counsel. More recently, that same company, RMS Titanic Inc., unveiled its plan to salvage the Marconi radio set from inside the ship and adding it to its massive collection of Titanic artifacts. The proposal was challenged in court by NOAA, which argued that such an extreme example of commercial exploitation of a wreck site sets a strong precedent which would make it difficult to protect the wreck from future exploitation, and more importantly, protect other wrecks throughout the world. What makes the proposal so extreme? Well, the Marconi radio is not only inside the ship, but it is completely inaccessible. Retrieving it would require the salvagers to cut a hole in the roof of the boat deck house just above the Marconi room. In other words, not only would the salvagers be taking an item from inside the wreck, already controversial, but they would be permanently damaging the wreck in order to do so. RMS Titanic Inc. argued in court that the wreck is rapidly deteriorating, and if it were to collapse, the Marconi set would be lost forever. They even went so far as to call it the most famous radio in history. I suppose that this conjecture on the part of the company is arguably true. Ultimately, the court ruled in favor of RMS Titanic Inc., but the execution of the controversial salvage operation has been delayed due to the pandemic, and as of the making of this video, the Marconi set has yet to be retrieved. Do you think RMS Titanic Inc's reasoning is enough to justify the salvage of the Marconi set from the wreck site? Let me know in the comments. I'm hoping that this video can stimulate some healthy discourse on the topic. As for me, I have been mulling over these issues for years, and I have finally thought about it enough to comfortably state my position on it. I believe that we should salvage what we can from Titanic without disrespecting the people who lost their lives when the ship went down and their families. To me, this means retrieving any items we can from the debris field, so long as they are not the personal belongings of someone who lost their life. If we could positively identify a personal item of someone who survived, then I would even be in support of salvaging those items. But this would be difficult or impossible to do for most items, so this distinction is admittedly pedantic. Perhaps if a personal item could be traced to a specific victim, which is the case for some items, and the victim's family is in agreement, I would be in support of retrieving those items as well. As far as taking items from inside the wreck, my view is more or less the same as with the debris field, with the caveat that the wreck should not be put at significant risk in the effort of salvaging artifacts. In the case of the Marconi set, I am not an engineer and I cannot speak to the risk to the wreck that such an operation would entail. But it is not a personal item, so if it can be taken without risking the structural integrity of the wreck, I would be in support of this action, provided that the recovered device was preserved and made available to the public. Without a doubt, the Marconi set is uniquely significant. Without it, the human toll of the sinking of Titanic might have been even greater. It is a one-of-a-kind artifact due to its historical significance, and to see it in a museum would be extremely impactful to countless people, and thus help keep the memory of Titanic alive, even as the ship herself slowly vanishes. Thank you for watching another Great Big Move vlog. These shorter and more casual videos are meant to get the community engaged in conversation, so I encourage you to discuss the topic respectfully amongst yourselves in the comments section.